I almost did it to myself again. Too many things to think about. Hello, welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies, etc., etc. All right. I already managed to forget to turn on my mic once. Okay, so we're in the midst of this parable, Matthew 15:15, and I've got to adjust. I had already gotten 4 verses into it. There we go. After only covering 2 verses yesterday. So Peter answers and says to him, declare unto us this parable. And he's referring to the thing that Jesus said, because he starts disputing with the Pharisees about the traditions of the elders. And he begins that after they had said, well, why don't your disciples wash their hands before they eat? And they meant in a ceremonial washing that they practiced after their traditions. It was a traditional thing. It was not a thing that was like, oh, we're doing, trying to wash off the filth. It was more of a trying to sanctify. Okay. At least that's how I've always understood it. And so, anyways, but they had this, tradition about how you wash your hands before you eat. It doesn't really matter what it is. I mean, so anyways, and then he questions them, of course, about, he's like, well, why, you make void the law of God through your traditions, because you have a tradition that says this about honoring your father and your mother, and, you can get away with breaking the commandment because of the tradition. Well, then he says something that the disciple, and it's verse 11 that Peter is especially concerned with. Not that which goeth into the mouth defiles a man, but that which cometh out of the mouth, this defileth a man. For them, that was, you got to think about it, because in the Old Testament law, they had dietary restrictions. And if you, I'm sorry, my computer's just shaking because my legs come into contact with the desk too much because it's too short. So they had the laws of the dietary restrictions, and these things were part of their very much about being a Jew. And so when he says that the things you take in your mouth don't defile you, I mean, that's so much of their identity was wrapped up in, we don't eat pork, we don't eat this, we don't eat that, we only eat animals that divide the hoof and chew the cud. We don't eat, lizards and creeping things. And it was all part of being separate and distinct as a people. Also about there's more to it than just that, but let's just leave it at that. But for them, it would be a very shocking thing to say, hey, nothing going inside of you is going to defile you. It's that which comes out of you. And this is, to this day, I think that a lot of people still have that mentality. They're more worried about what people see, about what people, the content of entertainment and stuff. They'll be not deceived. Bad company corrupts good behavior. Certainly, but I think about like in the 80s and 90s when they had the parental councils trying to censor music and trying to they're all concerned about certain kind of music being the devil's music. I mean, you listen to the beginning of I've got heavy metal, Bible songs. For some people, that in and of itself is probably offensive, and I never give much thought myself, honestly, about the offense because it's kind of gone away. But Jimmy Swaggart used to just stand up there and rip into the band Stryper, which is a Christian metal band from the 80s. He used to just rip into them. At the same time, they go out to their concerts and get ripped into by all the the audience, because they weren't Christians, the audience, for the most part. And when they throw Bibles into the crowd would throw them right back at them, you know. I mean, I'm not, you know, whatever you want to say about that. People are always kind of concerned about, like, you know, oh, don't watch that. Don't listen to that. Don't read that book. You know, I'm not talking about things like, you know, something, well, you know, it's like, I'm not talking about things like pornography, or, you know, I'm talking about things like real ideas, because pornography is sort of, as a male, you can't look at that without, I mean, maybe you can, but 99% of men can't look at that without actually having lust immediately crop up in them. And so, therefore, it is not the image itself that defiles you. It is the thing that is in your heart that defiles you, though. You know what I mean? So, do you not yet understand that whatever entereth in at the mouth goeth into the belly, and is cast out into the draught? I suppose that's some, you know, I guess immediately it makes me think of drain. You know, the bowel movement goes down the drain into the cesspit. But those things which proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart. They defile the man, and they defile the man. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man, but to eat with unwashen hands defileth not a man. So again, I saw something, you know, and here's the thing, it's like, to understand human thinking, I have to come into contact with other humans. To be able to think myself, I need to listen to other people. Because otherwise, if I just sit here in Northwest Illinois, out in the middle of nowhere where I live, and don't talk to anybody except my wife, I'm going to have a very limited perspective on the world and on how people think. And it helps me understand what Jesus meant, and why he said things, and why they're important. You know what I mean? Like, so if I listen to some atheists talk about trying to rip the Bible up, you know, I'm not literally rip it up, I mean, but they're trying to metaphorically rip it up by ripping into, trying to destroy its credibility and stuff. You know, if you don't have strong faith, that can hurt you. If you don't know your Bible, if you don't have very strong faith, that can be damaging. And unless you're just not really listening to them. And one thing this guy said, I forget his name. He's the evil looking dude with long hair. I think he probably thinks that's hilarious. But, you know, I can't remember his name. I wish I could, because I don't care if I mention it. I'm sure he'd be delighted. But one of the things he was slamming the Ten Commandments, yeah, and saying, and I'm not a big Ten Commandments guy. Anyone who studies with me knows that. It's like, I am not a oh, you got to follow the Ten Commandments, because I believe in the law of Christ. But the reasons he was slamming the Ten Commandments was the part that fascinated me. One particular commandment, because some stuff I was listening and I'm like, okay, I've heard this before, I've heard that before. Move on. But then he talked about the covet, and he said that's a thought crime. You shall not covet your neighbor's this and that, and he dismissed it as being not significant, because it's just if it's in your head, it's not important. Is there anything that could be more foolish? I mean, for someone who's trying to tear down religion, to say that things that go on in your head are not important is the most ridiculous piece of nonsense I've ever heard proceed out of the mouth of someone who thought they were intelligent. I mean, you know, oh, you know, religion is just totally trying to tear it down and say it's stupid, ignorant, whatever, but at the same time trying to tell me that the thought offenses are, you know, when your first commandment is thou shalt not believe in God, You're going to tell me thought sins don't matter. You know, that's pretty rich. Because, and here's why evil thoughts do matter. Because they lead to evil deeds. If you keep filling your mind with all kinds of evil thoughts, it's going to work itself out into an evil deed. And that is absolutely the truth. You keep the more you poison yourself with evil thoughts, you know what I mean? If you keep lusting after something, not just another person, but like just someone's goods, it's going to manifest itself in ways that are not right. Either the way you treat that person might become disrespectful, or you might seek to undermine them, or whatever. I don't know, because I try to police my thoughts. I try to keep them in the realm of thoughts that lead to righteousness. You know what I mean? I try not to poison myself, though you can get poisonous. I know that, you know, I'm not a perfect person. I mean, like, I get angry with people. Mostly through frustration, I think. Because I'm a perfectionist, and sometimes when I work, I demand very much of the people I work with. I demand that they, I want them to uphold the highest standard that I think is necessary. You know, and not always, you know. And then, do I always hold myself to the same standard? I try to. I'm not always self-aware enough to know, but I try to hold myself to a high standard, and I expect the same thing of others. And so when I feel like their attitude is not one of the kind of that makes me feel good. I mean, I like to see certain things that reassure me that they're of the same mind, and then I don't see it. I become frustrated. I start thinking this person is working against me, and so on and so forth. Now, that just starts to happen, and I try to ward it off, or I try to, like, sometimes it has to run its course, and then you stomp on it, you know, or maybe you carry it too far, and then you say something, and then you gotta be rebuked by the aftermath. Or you can be stubborn and just keep on in it, and you know. Anyways, but what I'm saying is basically that thoughts do matter. There's no sin that didn't start in a thought. You know, so you know, it's like they say about gateway drugs. It doesn't necessarily. I don't believe in that. Because you smoke cigarettes, you're going to smoke marijuana, or because you drink beer, you're going to go on to marijuana and go on to cocaine. But there isn't a person who does heroin who didn't start off doing marijuana, drinking alcohol. It certainly is a gateway. Nobody ever just drops it. You know, I mean, maybe, but. Yeah, I mean, it's not a one-to-one analogy. You know what I'm saying? It's like maybe there's someone out there who just, you know, at 14, they just shot up heroin because their parents had heroin or whatever. I don't know. But you generally don't start injecting yourself with that first. Though God only knows, you know. I don't really know. Though I spent a significant portion of my life addicted to marijuana. You know, all of about 13 years. From the time I was 17 to the time I was about 30. I don't know that, you know, because I never, well, I did go to harder things, you know, not much, but I mean, you know, I never got to cocaine, but I did the LSD. You know, now I look at it, it's insane. That is what led me, because I overdid my drug use and I thought I was going to die. And you'd be surprised, you know, you start combining things. It was combining things, alcohol, marijuana, LSD all at once. and all of a sudden I should be wide awake, but the world is going black, I was afraid to pass out. And the thing is, when you do that, you can't pass out. You shouldn't pass out because LSD has a tendency to keep you awake. I think about it terrifies me a little bit because I can think about how foolishly you can throw your life away, abusing substances. And but it gets a hold of people. And the message of Jesus is that, it's not the things that go in your mouth. I mean, generally this passage is taken, in fact, in Mark, I believe it says, thus he said, purging all meats. Or purging all meats. It goes into the drought, purging all meats. And some people take that as Jesus' affirmation that that in saying so, he sanctified the eating of meat which had been forbidden to the Jews. I don't know if that's the intention. But, when you consider what he said about David eating the shewbread, and the fact that later on, this and some people, I know the legalists are probably going nuts right now as I'm saying this, but you look in the New Testament and show me wherever it is affirmed that we should continue in those commandments, those carnal commandments. It is very clear, I think, in the New Testament that those things are definitely brought down to an insignificant level, especially for Gentiles. Gentiles are not required to live as Jews because my identity is not a Jew. I've been accused of being a Jew. I don't know what, I guess because I have a Mediterranean look, being a quarter Italian. But and that may be, but if you looked at my brother, he's blonde-haired, blue-eyed. It's just the traits. But yeah, as far as I know, there's no, I'm not Jewish at all. You know what I mean? And even if I had a tiny smidgen, I'm not going to start living like one. I don't have to. I was called as Paul says, if you're called uncircumcised, then abide in that calling. If you're called as a Gentile, you don't have to become a Jew. If you're called as a Jew, you don't have to become a Gentile. You don't have to start eating pork and all that. You can maintain your dietary things. And honestly, if you want to follow those laws, as long as you understand that in so doing, you're not more righteous than me. You haven't sanctified yourself more. The things which you eat are not what make you holy and sanctified. That's clearly what Jesus is saying. There's a part in the book of Acts where he shows Peter a vision of all these beasts, and God says, all these unclean animals brought down on a sheet. And yes, I know they went back up again. Arnold Murray always picked on that, like as if that was saying, retracting the things. Eat whatever you want, and then he takes it away. Well, before you do, lest you eat it and be defiled. No, but the message was that Peter, when the Lord showed him that vision and said, eat, arise, kill and eat these things, these unclean animals, it was a sign that God was accepting Gentiles and that Peter should accept them also. And that's what he said. I should not, the Lord has revealed to him, he said, that he should not call any man common or unclean, for in every nation God honors those who, and I'm paraphrasing, who love righteousness, who fear God and love righteousness, essentially. Or follow after righteousness, I think it was. Who fear God and follow after righteousness, or something of that nature. I'm not going to look it up. So, and that was Cornelius. And if you want to look that up, you can look up the name Cornelius, and you'll find that's the key word to finding that passage in Acts. And the point was that the deeds matter more than the things you eat. And I take this beyond, of course, just food. I've used, like if you have, they wouldn't keep company with Gentiles. But how are you going to preach the gospel to Gentiles if you won't, have any dealings with them, if you try to avoid them at every turn? The Jews thought that by eating with a Gentile, they were defiling themselves. They were making themselves unclean because the Gentiles ate food that was unclean. They wore garments that were incorrect. They did all these things differently than the Jews, and therefore they themselves were unclean. And if you touched a Gentile, you'd have to go cleanse yourself. You can see why the Jews were not very popular. It's like it it leads to this sort of feeling. Imagine someone who you shake their hand, and you know what? They ought to do it. They immediately run and wash their hands because God knows what you've been doing with your hands, right? But it's a little off-putting, right? If it's like, certainly it shouldn't be done in front of somebody. I'll say that. If you're gonna wash your hands all the time after coming into contact with someone, don't do it in front of them. You just wait a few moments and say, "Excuse me, I'll be right back," and go off some other part of the house and wash. Anyways, I mean, otherwise, then we should wash every time we touch money, and it's all dirty. As far as for health reasons, perhaps that's good advice. But as far as for sanctification in the sight of God, there's nothing there, is what Jesus is saying. And though in the Old Testament it had been so, that's what I say is that Jesus is reprioritizing law. And he assigns this kind of thing a very low priority. In fact, essentially reducing it to no priority at all. Because most Christians don't follow the dietary laws. And they don't follow a lot of the clothing restrictions. There are some who do. And I've had interesting debates with those people. I admired one particular debate we had with a guy where he actually admitted that because he didn't want to say that my salvation depended on my going to church on Saturday or observing the Sabbath at least, right? I don't know what observing the Sabbath has to do with going to the church, because that's not in the law. You know what I mean? By all accounts, it looks like in the New Testament they met on the first day of the week. Why not observe the Sabbath on Saturday? Take your day off. I'd love to do that. I'd love to just Saturday. I just don't do anything. No chores. I just sit around all day and observe the Sabbath by doing nothing. And then Sunday I just go to church, and I can also go to work too. That would be convenient. I mean, what's wrong with that? Why is the only day that it's appropriate to go to church is Saturday for some people? I don't know. And then they go to church and they use that as an excuse to not keep the Sabbath, because they certainly aren't keeping the day holy, as far as I can tell. Some do, I suppose. I'm not a big Sabbath keeper. I'm not a Sabbath keeper at all, actually, as far as keeping it on a particular day. I keep the Sabbath in that I have found rest in Christ, and I sanctify every day alike. That's what I try to do. That's why I'm doing a Bible study on Tuesday morning. So all the murder, adultery, fornication, theft, false witness, and blasphemy in the world comes forth from the heart, from evil thoughts. It's not, we can't blame like, oh, I saw the shiny thing. It's evil dwelling in us that brings about these actions. It's the things that, it's again, the things that come out that defile. It's interesting. I've studied a little bit about health and diet, and in college I took some courses on, physical, not exactly physical education. Let me put it that way, but sort of a little bit. Weight training and stuff like that. And one of the interesting things that I see people emphasizing as far as diet goes, that nothing you eat is actually in you. Like, it's basically from your mouth to the other end, It's like it's all external. It is inside, but I mean, it's not really in your body. It's inside your body, but it doesn't get into you that way. It passes through, and where it gets collected is when it gets pulled into the bloodstream, because the bloodstream is the way that all the nutrition is spread throughout the body. To the bloodstream, so it has to get picked up as it goes along, and it takes off what it needs in the good, and it leaves the bad, and the bad comes out. And that's how we should, we can, by engaging in, and I equate it not just to the mouth, but to the ears and the eyes, all the organs that take things in. The things that, the feelings, the thoughts are what defile, not the actual sensory part. Watching a piece of propaganda from, I don't know, from some other religion doesn't immediately defile you. It can. Watching someone debate some doctrine, it doesn't necessarily defile you unless it goes into your heart. You know what I mean? So it is not that you shouldn't take any care at all about how you hear. But it's saying that of necessity, nothing that goes into you necessarily defiles you unless it enters into your heart. I like to add that, because things can enter into our hearts. You see something and you digest it, and it becomes part of you. So it's not to say that you shouldn't have some care, okay, about what you put into your mind. Especially, you got to consider your strength of faith, and also consider your weaknesses of temptation. You shouldn't, if you have sexually immoral, if lust is a problem, adultery of the mind, then don't watch R-rated movies with sexual situations or something like that. And certainly, it should go without saying that you shouldn't look at pornography, because it will bring the bad thoughts. False witness. I don't think I need to address each of these sins in particular: murder, adultery, fornication, theft. Those are the things that defile a man. And Jesus went out thence and departed into the coast of Tyre and Sidon. Let's take a moment before we go on to encourage you to subscribe to Line by Line Bible Studies, and to click on the like button while you're doing that. Because that's what people say when they ask people to subscribe. I don't know that it does any good at all for any reason, but whatever. And then you can visit my website. That is up to you. I have more studies, songs, and more, like writing and stuff. And then I have my personal YouTube page, which is, I'm trying to dedicate to music, but anyways, you can check that out. That's all linked in the description below. And then this is, if you have a question, you can either type it in the chat box, over there in the live stream, or if you don't want to, stick your nose out publicly, you can send it to questions@oraclesofgod.org. Or if if you're asking the question very long after the live stream, because if you give me the question soon enough, I can address it in the next study, especially if it has something to do with the book of Matthew or this passage I'm talking about now. If you have a general question or a suggestion for a study you'd like me to do, you can do that. You can also use that address to make your suggestion. I have plenty of plans of things I'm going to talk about. Just need the time to prepare them. Then Jesus went thence and departed into the coast of Tyre and Sidon. So he's leaving the Commonwealth of Israel. I mean, the general area where the Jews nation is occupied. There's the area about Jerusalem and Judah, the southern part, and there's also the Galilee area of the northern. But now they go up to Tyre and Sidon, and I realize if I was my whole map that I just drew was good on the up and down, but actually for you, Tyre and Sidon, I think would be over here if you were looking at a map. I forget that everything's mirrored. No, it's not mirrored. That's the point. It's the opposite of mirrored. So, and behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast and cried unto him. She's a Canaanite woman of Canaan. You remember Canaan? He was the one who Noah cursed for looking at his father's nakedness, implying not just that he saw his father naked, but that he told his brothers he was disrespectful. He laughed at his father. Not necessarily he laughed, but it was something disrespectful in seeing his father's vulnerability and telling people about it. Look at my dad, he's all naked. Isn't that hilarious? And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with a devil. But he answered her not a word, and his disciples came and besought him, saying, Send her away, for she crieth after us. But he answered and said, I am not sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then came she and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. But he answered and said, It is not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to dogs. Meat is means suitable. Just like in when the Lord says to Adam, I will make him an helper meet for him. I always thought some people call it a help meet. It means suitable. It's not a single word. It's a suitable helper. And she said, Truth, Lord. Yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table. Then Jesus answered and said unto her, O woman, great is thy faith, be it unto thee even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. This is significant where this comes and what the message is. This is so critical to your understanding of the whole New Testament, because I'm gonna do a little. Hopefully this weekend. Now my computer's working. I get some sleep, and I'm gonna get up hopefully on Saturday, one of these weekends, and I want to talk about something. And it has to do with the New Testament God, as far as the way God is portrayed in the New Testament. Because there's this false idea out there that, oh, in the Old Testament God was this way, but in the New Testament he's all loving. He loves all. God loves everybody, and at the same time he's going to toss you into hell and all that. And he loves everybody, is what they say, and that's a lie. God does not love everybody. He loves all people. He loves Jews and Gentiles. He loves male and female. He loves the world, in that he sent his son for the world. But not every individual in the world is beloved of God. And I know that offends people, but what you believe is based on a tradition, a false tradition, which is based on basically trying to make it is a bad reading of the New Testament, basically trying to turn God into something even better than he is. He doesn't just love all people, willing to save people from any nation, but rather he loves every individual. Every individual. He loves you. Not even considering what kind of fallout you create by saying that. Because it's manifest. Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated. while they were yet in the womb, having done neither any good nor evil. Romans chapter 9. Having done neither good nor evil, I hate one and love the other. And those were both the seed of Abraham through Isaac. They were both Isaac's son. Esau was the firstborn in line to inherit the blessing of Abraham. I hate him. And that's Old Testament. It's affirmed in the New. Affirmed and put an exclamation point on it. God is long-suffering to usward, his elect, not willing that any of us shall perish. His elect, who he have chosen, who he has loved. God is not slack, but he will, I can't remember the context, but he will have all men to be saved, all men, Jews, Gentiles, Romans, Chinese, Japanese, but not every man to be saved. Please. That's not what the New Testament teaches. The New Testament God is not suddenly all loving. It's the same God as the Old Testament. The idea of all loving God would be a massive change from the Old Testament. Because God, though, Psalm 11, glad I finally memorized that number. Let me tell you something about God. Psalm 11 verse 5, and what's cool is I can just plop this one on top, I believe, and then do this. Yeah, okay. Look at it. The Lord trieth the righteous, but the wicked and him that loveth violence, his soul hateth. Okay? That doesn't mean that someone, like, look at the Apostle Paul, he was persecuting the church, but God loved him in spite of this. Because, and I don't like to put a because on anything God does, because I don't know God's ways. I don't know how high are his ways, how they are past finding out. I don't know. I have suspicions. I have opinions. And so when I say because anything with God, that is something I try to avoid because I am not deep in his counsels. Sometimes people are so just arrogant about things. It just really ticks me off. Because this, because that. I know why God does everything. I don't. But I do know that he is just. And that, but not just. He's more than just. He is generous. And salvation is all about the generosity of God. It's not about the justice of God. The justice of God would be, it's Noah's Ark. You all die. That's God's justice. You all deserve to die. You are dogs. That is the justice of God. That's the word of Jesus to you Gentiles, you sinners. You dogs don't deserve a crumb from my table. That's the Lord Jesus. You dogs. You dirty, filthy animals. You Gentiles. You get nothing unless you put your faith in me. As she is, great is your faith, woman. Be it as you say. He denied her several times. Oh, please, please. It's not fit to give what is intended for the children to dogs. Because that is how the Gentiles were regarded by the Jews in the time of Christ. They were dogs, animals, filthy. And the New Testament, the change in God is that he would accept animals of the Gentiles. I mean, not that the Jews themselves could not render themselves bestial by failing to adhere to the word which God had spoken. And they could be, that goes back to the prophets. It's like, I took you when you were unclean and I made you my people. And now you have despised my covenant. I will cast you off with the Gentiles and I will regard you as Gentiles. That's what happened to the northern kingdom. They were deported and they were scattered. And they didn't come back. They were consumed. I mean, there was a remnant returning. There's always a remnant returns, but many of those, people perished and went the way of Esau, also seed of Abraham. There are lots of renegade Jews in the Old Testament who it's not, they're not all righteous. You know what I mean? That's their history. That's the history of the Old Testament. It's a very important story. The story in the New Testament is, this is how God loves the world. Cornelius, you fear God, you love righteousness, I accept you. Woman, great is your faith, I accept you. Though you're a dog and deserve not a crumb from my table. That is how God looks at the world. You people don't deserve a crumb off of my table. I owe you nothing. That's the message. That God owes you nothing. But if you will put your faith in him, and when you put your faith in him, it's not just like, I believe. No. You put your faith in him. And if your faith is in him, if you truly trust him, then it's like, all right, close your eyes, and I'm going to lead you now. Right? I'm going to show you. Step here, step there, walk this way, do this, do that. It's not about a list of commandments, but it is about the Spirit of God entering into us through faith, and we become obedient to his word. And if there is, here's the thing, it's like faith without works is dead. That's what, the only time the Bible says faith alone, only time ever, is in the book of James, and it says, you see that a man is not justified by faith alone. Because lonely faith is oxymoronic. There is no true faith that abides alone. Faith that is alone is dead. It just doesn't happen. Everyone who believes in God, because it's not what you say, you think. Out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, right. And out of the heart also proceeds righteousness. All out of the heart produces good deeds. Out of the heart comes every action you perform in your life. And so don't tell me you can have faith alone and have it not have any effect on your life any more than you can have evil thoughts and not have it affect your life. If you have evil thoughts, it will affect your life and the things you do. If you have faith in your heart, it will affect your life and the things you do. There is no escaping that. And so faith alone is an oxymoronic piece of nonsense. It's dead. Faith has its work. And it's a work of God. It's not that you must do works to please God. It's just that faith will work in you to produce an effect. That's why the parable of the sower, there's fruit coming forth. It's natural. If you say you have faith and there is no effect from having faith, none, then you don't have faith. The word was stolen away from you at some point. It withered away before it brought forth fruit. It's not there. Okay? You are saved by faith. That is taught in the New Testament. Because without faith, it is impossible to please God. But ultimately, what's underlying faith is God's grace. Because you don't deserve a crumb off of his table. You dirty dog. You don't. And so we are unworthy. There's no amount of works I can do apart from faith that's going to make, there is no, see, here's the thing, it's like that I can do all kinds of good things, right? I can give my body to be burned, as Paul said. But if I have not love, is what is in that context. But that has something to do, but love has to do with faith. Because out of the heart proceeds good works. Out of the heart proceeds love. Out of the heart proceeds kindness and charity and all the things that are desirable in men that they should do. And the idea that at any time in the New Testament it's like saying that you should have faith and be void of works. It's ridiculous. Works are not merely like good deeds either. It is the work in you in becoming a Christian. The change of heart, the change of mind. If faith is in your mind, it can't occupy the same space as evil thoughts. Because whatsoever is not of faith is sin. That Paul also said that. So sin comes from not having faith. Whenever I sin, it's a shortage of faith. It's for certain. And I'm getting frustrated with people. They're not living up to my standards. Why? I'm afraid that this is not going to work out. The job's going to fall through. But it's everybody else's fault. It's my fault. I should have faith. You know? And I know I'm short on faith. I've known that for years. That's why God, when he gave me the Holy Spirit, he gave me such a powerful experience. Because like, this guy is going to fall away if I don't do something about him. You know? And apparently he must. My wife will say, "You're so blessed," and I'm like, "You're right," and I'm like, "God must like me." You know, it sounds arrogant to say so, but no, it's not. I have a lot of good things that happen in my life, and if bad things happen too, it's all right because nothing can separate me from God's love. You know, I know bad things can happen to me. I've had bad things happen to me. You know, from financial to my health to, you know, almost losing children. I haven't actually lost. I mean, God, do I want to go through that test? No. I don't think my faith would be broken by it because I don't blame God. I would just think like, I guess this is what I got to be subject to. I submit. You know? He gave me enough to believe in that I pray it'd never be necessary. I'd rather do something else with my children than test my faith. Faith is a gift. And I'm glad to have it. But, yeah. But this story is just absolutely... I mean, think about the power of Jesus' words. You know, why don't we see this Jesus ever on display? Preach out of this at your... When was the last time you heard this preached in your sermon with the power? Like I just said it. You dirty dogs don't deserve any crumbs from the table of the God of the Jews. You filthy Gentile dogs. Don't you know that I consigned the Canaanites to be wiped out? What are you even doing here? But there were, but you know, it's funny in a way. The Lord saved them, in a way. I mean, well, because everything that is done under the sun, is proceeding forth out of God's plan. All things work together for good for those who love God. And the reason there were still Canaanites is, and I'm trying to remember the name of the city. There were some clever Canaanites, and when the Jews were invading, they came professing that they were from some far country. They were far off. And they made a covenant with the Jews. And then when they came to the city, they invoked the covenant. And they prevented the city from being destroyed. And the Lord was wroth with them. You know? Because they had been foolish. And so they were left. And part of that led... Here's the thing. Because... You know, I can brush by it, but I don't like to. People always talk about the genocide in the Old Testament, the genocide of the Canaanites. You know, oh, what about the genocide of Noah's Ark? What about the genocide of every generation? Is it, you know, human life? You know, here's the thing: if you don't believe in God of some sort, and I'm saying some sort of God, you know what I mean? Like there's some higher irrational principle of being in the world, good and evil. If you believe in good and evil, that's not scientific. Okay, that's not. If you believe there's wicked and not wicked, that's not scientific as far as, that's not, you can study that scientifically, certainly. But the origin of those feelings is not empirical. Good and evil, wicked. There's no empirical reason for good and evil. And when people truly void themselves of belief in these irrational principles, they devolve into nihilism and, and things like the Columbine shooters. I haven't read their diaries, but I've heard about them and the things they wrote. They hated existence. They wanted to just kill humanity. And also that, I suspect that the Las Vegas shooter was similarly minded. I think there was and not that people can't, for religious reasons, do shootings, but they have different motivations. The Columbine shooters were motivated by hatred of existence, by complete absence of belief in God or principles of good and evil. It's like, why isn't it good to just kill everybody? And God determines good and evil from his own perspective. And the eradication of humans could be a good thing, couldn't it? I mean, you look at the planet, wouldn't be scarred up with all our buildings and stuff. I mean, I'm probably getting into hostile territory here, or dangerous waters. But when God says kill them all, they all die. That's it. And we'll say, well, that's evil. Is that well, for them? Yeah. Well, all death, is it not an evil? Because what is evil? Because evil's not even a thing. It's not a thing. Like, it's no thing. It's not an objective thing. It's a subjective absence of good, absence of benefit. I don't like death is an evil that comes about to all. Right? God says, I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal. God is not evil, but he certainly creates evil. He takes away good things. When God punishes, he can be righteous in his punishment, but the subjective experience of the person being punished is evil. All the evil that came on Job. Well, that was the devil. Well, I'm doing it with God's permission. By your leave. Don't deny. I mean, by your leave. You've put a fence around him. Let me go mess with him. You protect him. You're not allowing me to, I want to hurt Job. Please remove the protection. Okay. Do as you please, but spare his life. I've got more to do with Job. And again, the book of Job to me reads a bit like a parable. And it will. Oh no, Paul! No! It's got to be literally. It does have to be literally true. Really, that really had to happen. It's as history. I think it's a bit weird. As literature, it's a bit amazing, beautiful, and true. Absolutely true. The book of Job. True. I affirm the truth of the scriptures. But as far as like when did we conflate the idea of things being true with the idea of them having been historical events? And like Job is true. It doesn't have to be historical to be true. But for some reason there's like that it's part of trying to make the Bible into something that it doesn't declare itself to be. And it's I'm telling you, for fundamentalists, it's a very inconvenient position to take. It's why your children are becoming atheists, by the way. It's what makes them vulnerable. Because most of the... I've never seen anyone who claimed, I'm a former Christian, and now I'm an atheist. They were always fundamentalists. Another fundamentalist atheist, because it's a fundamentalist type position. The only things that are real are the things that are empirically real. So how can you take that view of the Bible, have no metaphor, no story, no story upon which to build an idea of something that's not visible? How can you take the Bible and then try to cram it into a scientific mold? Because you can't put God under a microscope. Why do you think the book that has to do with God should be judged on a microscopic standard? It's foolish. That's why your children turn away from God. They haven't been properly brought up in the faith. They don't understand what faith is. This woman had faith, and that was honored by the Lord. She worshipped him. It's worthy of note as we pass, and we're just about done. I got 5 minutes. I got, not looking at the clock, I look at the, try to get an hour in. I don't have to. I'm not going to do a half hour. But I like to do a full hour. And let's look at the question. Let's see if anyone's bothered in the chat. Any commentary? No. Okay. That's fine. I don't actually require any. I can go on without any questions at all. I'll think of questions myself. I'm not shipped at the lost. In the last 5 minutes, I want to make sure I got the dog part on there pretty good. When God puts us down, and he does put us down, we'll die. In every generation, our lives are snuffed out because we're sinful. There's no amount of good works you can do to merit everlasting life. What would you give to live forever? How much money do you think that would cost? I mean, if we have the technology, how many people could afford it? You know, like having their brain transplanted to a new body consistently, or having expensive injections to renew their tissues. You'd die anyways. Just as tragic, if not more so. Though when the Tower of Babel starts looking like it's gonna shape into something, the Lord comes along and confounds us, and we can already see the one world order that was trying to form itself, you know, is already being confounded because of the problem of language, not of I speak English, you speak Spanish. No, it's like I speak, I speak right wing, let's say, and you speak left wing. And though we speak English, we literally can't communicate with each other. That's where we are in this country. We don't speak each other's language. Good is not good. When I say good, I mean something entirely different than what you say good. When I say evil, I mean something entirely different than what you say when you mean evil. You try to build it too big, everyone starts fighting over control. You know, we will determine the destiny of the tower. We will sit atop the tower. And we will control everything from here. We have a set of priorities. No, we have a set of priorities. This is how it ought to be. And then, though, we can speak all the same language. But in our effort to build that heavenly tower, we will be confounded. So that we can't talk to each other anymore. And if we really paid heed to the Bible and the lessons that are handed down from the generations and from the Lord himself, we wouldn't even try to build the stupid tower. We'd be like, yeah, that's been done. But there's always people think, we can make utopia. The whole world under one thing. When that happens, whatever's on top of it is the Antichrist, by the way. Whatever's on top of that earthly one world thing is going to be Antichrist, and it's going to be dysfunctional from the word go and will not last. Can't have a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. Have that. That won't work. Because one head is usually best. You know, anytime you start splitting off heads in your leaderships, it gets messed up. Dogs, Truth Lord, you have the Crumbs. Alright. And I think I covered that well enough. You know, the possessor that we've talked about devil possession in the early, you know, go back to the, I forgot the chapter off the top of my head, the Gadarenes, the Gergesenes, or whatever. The men in the tombs. You can look up that, you know, if you want to have more talk about that. I'm not going to go into detail against that right now. So we will finish up here. And we just did an hour. And that's fine. Her daughters may hold that very hour. Okay, pick up with verse 29 tomorrow. But for my money, I could make this a 2-hour study. Except I have work to do. I really have to go. So, thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to studying with you again tomorrow. All I gotta do now is come up, what are we going to close with? Does it matter? Let's just do this one.